Welcome to Macon Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College, and today I'm here with Professor Brenda Davis, Professor of Education, and today is May the 12th, 2015. Brenda, can you tell us how and when you happened to come to Randolph-Macon College?
Thank you, Linda. I came to Randolph-Macon first as an adjunct faculty member in education, and it was, I believe, 1986. It may have been 84. But the person that was chair of the department at that time was Dr. Mary Kitterman. And I really didn't know, but Dr. Kitterman had followed my career path, my education, through some of her contacts at my undergraduate institution at the University of Richmond. So she invited me to teach a course, and it was wonderful. I taught it in the evenings and did that for, I think, 3 or 4 years. Dr. Kitterman then called me while I was an adjunct and said, of course, I can't give you my position, but I am retiring from my job here and moving to Stevens College in Missouri. So at that juncture, I began the application process to come to Randolph-Macon in a full-time position. During that time, the college was seeking to bring in a greater diverse faculty, and the dean of the college thought that perhaps it would be easier to attract certain faculty members if they extended the search for an additional year. So I was called to set up an interview and then told, no, the position is now on hold for an additional year. So at that time, I actually took my life and career into the business corporate world and spent a year there in human resources and training. So teaching really did make a difference. Mm-hmm. And the following year, there was, again, the ad, and I applied, interviewed, and was given the position. I officially started here as full-time faculty in September of 1990. At that time, the department had had no chairperson, no one designated to be just in education for 2 years. Dr. Tom Porter was the chair of Teacher Prep Committee, and he wrote a very modest budget of $1,500 for the department. So there was a lot to try to put together and start really with some good foundation, in that the department program had been approved by the state before Dr. Kitterman left for both the elementary licensure program and for secondary education in an array of areas such as world languages, math, history, and certainly some sciences and an array of others. So that was how I came to the college, and it was quite a lot of work to get things going there.
Sounds like it. It sounds like you might have been a committee of one, especially at the beginning. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about how the department grew from
Certainly.
during that time?
Brenda Gilman was my colleague who was directing the newly approved elementary education licensure program. Brenda had been a Hanover County Teacher of the Year at Henry Clay Elementary, and had then left the county schools and worked in the college in a different office, but her heart was in elementary education. So Brenda took on the role of directing that. At the same time, she was back in school pursuing her PhD so that she could apply for a tenure-track position in elementary education. Brenda completed that, and the elementary program grew rapidly, and there was a lot of interest among our students. We were housed at that time in the bottom floor of the old Thomas Branch dormitory. That particular building had been condemned as a dorm in 1976, and the only floor that people were allowed to inhabit was the very first floor. It was not great living conditions or working conditions, but it was still a place our students saw as theirs. We had 2 offices, and we shared a small workspace with other departments. On that same first floor, there was the sociology department and the econ business department. And in the old Thomas Branch, there was also the Office of International Studies. So we were there for quite a long time. I really think it was well into the 2000s. But when the Thomas Branch renovation took place under Dr. Rusty Martin, the education department and the other departments were dispersed across campus. Some were given new building spaces to move into. We were moved into 2 offices on the top floor of Copley. We were given 2 adjunct offices and a closet that the chemistry department loaned to us. We stayed there for a year, and then we were moved to 2 spots in Haley Hall. We used the furnace room for a workspace for our students at that time. So certainly as the program continued to grow, we outgrew any of the space and things that we had. The biggest change and probably the most exciting at this time for the department was that in 2008, in the summer of 2008, in the beginning of that academic year in August, the education department was moved into its own space in the Mabry House, where we continue to reside. And that truly is an old house, but it was so exciting. Mm-hmm. It has a kitchen, it has a copier, it has a workroom upstairs. Our students very much view it as their own, and since we've been there from 2008 until now, they respect, they maintain it, they use it quite a bit in the evenings. We have a keyed entry lock keypad that students respect and value, so that's made it very rewarding. I think that part of the incentive to move us into a new space came from an on-site visit when the program pursued national accreditation. And that was in May of 2008, and we were given the initial approval, which was wonderful for the department because we were still just 2 full-time folks with adjuncts teaching several classes and then having adjuncts work as supervisors of student teachers. But the committee that came for the accreditation certainly spoke to the fact that we were overworked and that we had insufficient physical space for working. So I was very excited when the college chose to let us move into Mabry House, and that was a big day for the department. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Since that time, the department has been fortunate to add a position where we have the director of field work now, as well as 2 full-time positions continuing after Dr. Gilman retired. We added the music licensure program. That was approved, and most recently in 2012, the special education endorsement was approved. So now our students have an array of options, and we continue to have committee reviews before students are accepted into the program as juniors, and then again when they are allowed to student teach. Students have to take quite an array of costly standardized testing to be licensed in Virginia. Our students, in fact, have won recognition from the Educational Testing Service for their performance in some of these tests. We've also had quite a few award-winning graduates from our program from the late 1990s and ongoing. Michael Mudd was the 1998 Virginia Beginning Teacher of the Year. Most recently, Maggie Adams, and she is married now, but here Maggie Adams was an elementary minor, sociology major. She won the National Millikan Award for Educators, which was a $25,000 award to use as she chose for improving her teaching and her own education. We've had teachers that have become it's national board certification, which is a very rigorous certification teachers earn after they've taught 5 years. They're allowed to apply for that. We've also had 2 teachers even this year that have become Teachers of the Year at their local schools, and now they're being considered for Teacher of the Year in their counties or districts. And we've had a number of such winners, and we're really proud of them.
That's great. I love hearing the student accomplishments. When they were students here, your students also did some outstanding work while they were actually at Randolph-Macon. You could talk a little bit about the Student Virginia Education Association, the SVEA, where they're very active while they're still on campus, and some of the grants that they received to do work while they were here.
All righty, that would be great. I've had the privilege of advising this group since Dr. Gilman retired, and students have, in the Student Virginia Education Association, in fact, have won an array of grants that they have written, and I've tried to help mentor that. One of the grants that came from the NEA was a grant to work with the Preschool Initiative program in Hanover County, where they were providing some activities and support for the Father's Night, where fathers in the community and for children that were in the preschool program came and had a football night with different games that incorporated both academic content, but certainly the real focus was on the promotion of engaging fathers and their children. Another activity that came from a different grant was a grant that promoted the development of these math review units for Beaver Dam Elementary School. And these were activities that were fun games based on where children were struggling in math to pass the Virginia Standards of Learning. So they had math bags with games that would review the content that teachers would have them check out, and if students completed all the activities in the math bag, then the grant also allowed for prizes and things that the individual children earned. A third grant that the SVEA has earned since 2008 promoted math and science nights at Hanover Academy, which is a small private school. And this one, the students, it was really cute. They designed what in essence was a dinner menu, and children and their parents came and chose the activities from the menu, where they would go to these science tables or the math tables and participate in these little experiments, and then they got materials they could also take home. The final grant that I recall that they won was one that actually allowed them to purchase some things they wanted for the group. They got some business cards that identified them. They bought some things like some tables and materials so that they could set up at activities fairs and put up bulletin boards, and we've dedicated a wall and a bulletin board in the workroom at Mabry House for SVEA. the SVEA has won a number of state-level awards, and in fact, at the spring conference in 2015, they won the most recognized chapter award. I'm not sure if that's the exact wording for that. They also won Increase in Membership Award, and the president of the chapter was selected to be on the regional board for the Student Virginia Education Association, which has chapters in a number of colleges in the state of Virginia. So they've done quite a few things. They sponsor an art reception for Hanover County students and their families, and these students are those whose artwork is allowed to be displayed in Mabry House throughout each academic year. They have certainly done a number of fundraising things and tried to promote teacher education and its involvement in the community, as well as it as a career option.
That's wonderful. It's a very active group, and they've actually had a couple of programs here in the library in the past when we opened the Children's Corner collection.
They did.
They've been very active and a very impressive group of students. I saw that you also had a group of students lead a workshop for Randolph-Macon College faculty. So I wondered if you could talk about the experience of having your young student teachers teach their professors.
They were a little nervous about that initially, but these were students we had asked to participate that we had seen them teach and present in their classes. We knew that they understood the reasons and the theory behind the teaching and instructional activities that they did, and it was well received. Several of those same students that participated in that event, in fact, are some of the award-winning teachers in their schools. So that all came from the idea that several professors had informally asked about some of the strategies that we used, because maybe we were teaching in a room next to them and saw some of the things. And so my colleague, Leslie Robertson, organized the event, and we collaborated, and she invited some of these students and asked for our input, and so that's how that workshop evolved, and we did several of those.
That was good. Well, that's a great experience for them. If they can hold forth before teach their professors,
Yes.
they can probably handle a classroom, whatever level. I wondered if you wanted to talk about your experience or activities in the college governance or committees. You've been very active in your career here.
I've certainly spent a good deal of time on the curriculum committee, and it's been interesting to see the changes that have come over my time at the college. Certainly when they instituted the new curriculum, the curriculum committee had a great deal of work to do to try to define operationally what each of the areas of knowledge would look like based on what that working group had provided to us. And so how would we then know when new courses came in whether or not they fit those definitions that we had for whether it would qualify as a social science and those kinds of things. It's also been a committee that has had to often be viewed as one that just aggravated the faculty as opposed to trying to support and keep to the letter of what our curriculum is supposed to be, because the curriculum is owned by the faculty. I've seen the committee be more rigid. I've seen the committee be more flexible, and certainly in the last 4 or 5 years tried to be responsive to what was the will of the faculty, because with anything new, I think the faculty saw that some of the aspects of the newer curriculum were not working to benefit the entire college, and sometimes maybe they were not having the big goals met that we had hoped would be met, particularly in that freshman year experience. I've also served on ACAS, the committee. That acronym is always a funny one, the one for academic credits, and I'm not sure the rest of what all that means. But that was a really useful committee to understand the broader spectrum of the college and how we do look at individual students and what are their specific needs and how do we hold them to the standards of the college and its curriculum and goals, but at the same time look and be reasonable if someone had been ill for an extended period of time, example, and had missed over what was permitted. Still, how had that kid come back to meet all the expectations, and so could we approve it despite that? And that was a really important one. I've served on the college's grievance committee, which was a very difficult committee at times, but I really think the college administration and structure was important in creating that, because there were issues that couldn't be resolved sometimes with the other groups and councils and programs we had on campus. So I think that served a need. It doesn't have to meet, fortunately, very often, but when it did, it was dealing with some challenging issues. I've served on judicial appeals, and I think that was probably one of the more difficult committees because this typically dealt with very difficult situations our students were in, and sometimes you had to make hard choices. And there were also things that naively I didn't want to believe my students at the college put themselves in such circumstances. I've served certainly on the teacher preparation committee, which has been most helpful in its structure and its activity for the education department, because this is a committee made up of representatives from departments that have teaching licensure endorsement programs. It also includes members of the Hanover County Schools Human Resources Department. It includes a representative from our career counseling, or what is now the EDGE program. And those persons have been able to offer a broader perspective to changes and choices we may have to make as a program due to the ever-changing state licensure regulations, to the new accreditation, national accreditation group and its new regulations that are coming forth. And that committee meets at least 4 times a year to approve students being accepted as juniors and then for student teaching. And I think I've made a mistake. It meets at least 3 times a year. And then sometimes there are called meetings when we have curricular issues where we need their input.
Well, you really served in a wide variety, from curriculum to your own specialty. And one thing I would like to have on the record is your work with Phi Beta Kappa.
All righty. I think Phi Beta Kappa on Randolph-Macon's chapter has been particularly meaningful to me. Education is an interesting area in that it is a minor, and I think the fact that our students have to have a major in another liberal arts area has served them well, has served their students well. So Phi Beta Kappa here at Macon certainly has allowed me to interact with students that do not choose to pursue teaching, but I've also seen that every year we've had as many as 5 out of the 20-plus members that are initiated sometimes be education future teachers as well as their major. During the time I was serving as the chapter president, it was at the very end of that time that John Werner decided to endow the chapter. And I had the privilege of talking with John about some of the thoughts and ideas right there at the onset about how the chapter might use those funds. And it also allowed for things to evolve that we'd wanted to be able to do, but financially could not, such as recognizing those students as sophomores who had done so well their freshman year. So we had the sophomore awards now that could be given. So those were some wonderful things. The Richmond Association is the Phi Beta Kappa Association for Alum, and I served as president of that group. And at that time, the Richmond Association closely connected many of its activities with chapter events at either Randolph-Macon or the University of Richmond. I think that they are still given some invitations to events we have here, but I don't see their active involvement as much now as it was during the early 2000s and late 1990s.
Well, that's a very impressive service, though. I wanted to go on the record. Well, as you look back, you're about to retire. You have, I guess, another couple of weeks, and then your commencement, and this will be a really special year for you, sending off your students, I'm sure. I wondered if you had, if there were any reflections you wanted to have on your time at Randolph-Macon, what some of your most satisfying experiences here that you might want to reflect on. Just give you a chance to hold forth.
I think that probably the opportunity to be in an environment where you can continually learn, and that's part of your role, has been exciting to me. It's been particularly exciting to be what is not really part of who I am, but actually a cheerleader for teachers, to show that those that choose the teaching profession are some of those same students that the institution recognizes for their academic and their campus leadership, and that is a choice that serves our community, our state, or wherever they might choose to become teachers. It's been particularly satisfying in the early years before our program grew so big and had such extensive federal accreditation and state administrative demands, for me to be able to pursue some research interest I had. I have not been able to do that to any great degree in the last 4 years because I spend a lot of long nights completing multiple extensive data-heavy reports, and that doesn't leave a lot of time and energy for research. So I'm hopeful that the whole field of education is going to relax some of these reporting requirements in the next few years, because right now many of them duplicate the same information, but we have to put it in different formats for an array of different groups. But the research, when I have been able to do it, has certainly complemented things that are important in the field of pedagogical knowledge. Been particularly interested most recently in the last 4 or 5 years about neuroscience and teaching and learning, and have some data that I still need to refine, and I'm very excited to see about how coaches, in fact, have been using some of the same neuroscience principles, such as short group practice, take a break, move to work with a different partner, all of those things, and how it's worked effectively in coaching as well as when you observe it in practice in the classroom.
Well, that neuroscience interest certainly meshes very well with one of our most recent curriculum additions, which is the neuroscience.
That's right.
It's a major, but so many of our faculty, when they retire, still are on campus teaching. Do you see a role in that, teaching in any sort of neuroscience area?
I think that
psychology?
probably I would not see myself teaching in a neuroscience area, and I think that my thought would be that if I came back and looked at any coursework in education right now, I would, just by my presence, be still maybe hinder some of new changes or something that they would want to make, and I don't have any interest in doing anything to delay progress in the department.
Right.
And I think they're great folks there now.
Right. I certainly understand that, and you have your own interests to pursue, and personal and professional, I'm sure, as you look forward to retirement.
Well, I'm excited about it. Didn't expect to retire quite this early, but the opportunities and things have presented themselves, so I will see where I'm going.
Well, we wish you all the best, and thank you so much for coming in and sharing your memories with us today.
Thank you, Lynda, and I love what the library is doing to capture some of those. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.